Hello and welcome to Fintech Insider Insights. I'm Kate Moody, Customer Strategy Director here at 11FS. In today's episode, we're asking, has the fintech revolution ignored older customers? Next time you're using public transport and see an advert for a financial services product, check out the age of the people using the service on the poster. I'm pretty sure they will not be silver surfers. The fintech revolution of the last decade has done a lot for millennials in terms of banking options, and now attention is turning to Gen Z. But what about those who are aged 60 and over? Are they being properly served by the options available today? In this show, we've put together a panel of amazing experts to discuss what do the options look like for the over 60s in the current market, what are the challenges for serving older customers, and what could the future look like in this space? We'll discuss all this and more in today's show, but first, a few brief messages. Don't go anywhere.
This is Fintech Insider After Dark.
We are breaking out of the studio and bringing it to the community. It's a live recording of the Fintech Insider podcast featuring your favourite hosts and big-name guests.
Well, thank you very much for having me back.
Join us and become a certified Fintech Insider. Whether it's beers in London or pizza in New York, catch up with Fintech geeks and make new friends across the financial services ecosystem.
This is packed out, right? It's standing only.
We are bringing After Dark to the Village Underground in London on the 20th of September. Click the link in the podcast description or visit 11fs.com/afterdark.
Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Good night.
A lot of you know 11FS for our chart-topping podcasts, our events, videos, reports, and a bunch of other cool stuff that we do. But what a lot of you don't know is that this is just all our side hustle. We do so much more than that. At 11FS Ventures, we're partnering with ambitious businesses around the world to design, build, and launch truly digital financial services. We are building banks, shaping new propositions, and growing existing offerings that change the fabric of financial services. And our design, research, strategy and engineering experts are working to improve your customers' relationship with money. To find out a little bit more, check us out at 11fs.com/ventures.
Awesome, let's get started. As always, I'm joined by a panel of really exciting guests who can shed some light on this question. First off, it's great to be joined again by Will Jones, Executive Creative Director at 11FS. Thanks for being here, Will. Always nice to hang out. Can you give our listeners a quick reintroduction to your role at 11FS, please?
Yeah, sure. I look after design here. So my team's busy designing new products or fixing old ones to give customers a better relationship with their money. Pretty looking things that work better. I'm really looking forward to this topic. We've done some work with clients that touches on this demographic recently, and can't wait to get into it.
Awesome, yeah, looking forward to get your take for sure. And we have a very welcome return to Fintech Insider for Jasper Martens, CMO at PensionBee. Welcome back to the show, Jasper. What should our newer listeners know about you and PensionBee, please?
Thanks for having me, Katie. PensionBee combines your old pensions into a new online plan that you can manage on your phone. But particularly for this episode, also good to know that we also offer a really easy way to take money out of your pension from the age of 55 here in the UK. That's the age where you can legally start taking money out.
Yeah, no, and a really, really interesting change. I've had some interesting stuff in the UK recently changing how people can access those pensions, right? So I'm sure it's created a lot of interesting challenges. So looking forward to getting your take on that as we go through. And finally, it's a Fintech Insider debut for Alex Gauthier, Chief Revenue Officer at ClearEstate. Welcome to the podcast, Alex. Apologies if I've butchered your surname, but what should our listeners know about you and ClearEstate, please?
No, it was perfect, Kate. Thank you. So I'm Alex Gauthier. I'm one of the co-founders of ClearEstate and the Chief Revenue Officer. I lost my mom in 2019 and became the executor on her estate, which was really my first brush with the world of wills and estates. And I just found the process to be so complicated and confusing that I just thought there had to be a better way. So we created ClearEstate as a kind of one-stop shop for estate planning and settlement. And essentially, we do everything that traditional players like lawyers, accountants, banks, and trust offices do, except that we use technology to make the process 10 times more accessible, efficient, and affordable.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. Can't wait to hear your perspectives. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's start this conversation off by looking at the market today and kind of how we think we've got to where we're at. Will, how has financial services typically looked for older people historically, do you think?
I think they've almost taken them for granted as customers historically. And I think because, and I'm sure we'll get into it a lot, but for various reasons, there's slightly more inertia to switching banks. It's felt as a bit more of a permanent relationship. And obviously, we have people on this call that can talk about lots of other areas that serve these people. But I think typically, and especially in like a fintech sense, it's not really been seen as an area to focus on in terms of innovation from my perspective. And I think that's wrong, personally.
Jasper, what's your take?
I think they've been often overlooked, and their needs are not really addressed. So, to give you an example, we're all thinking about we need to save more for retirement. But hey, if you're in your 60s, guess what? You are actually near or at retirement. So it's more about how do I spend it? And unfortunately, a lot of us who are trying to innovate in financial services are not at that retirement age. So we're not stepping in their shoes enough, and we tend to forget them. And it's a shame because we're all getting older, and the silver generation, including myself, I'm getting halfway there with my hair color. We're here to stay for a long time.
Yeah, and I suppose Alex, again, just to kind of get the full panel's take on it, what has the status quo been for this customer group?
Well, from my perspective, I'd say it's status quo no more. We work closely with wealth and financial organizations, and what we're witnessing is just a huge shift in many of these organizations, and it seems like they're realizing that there's a very large portion of the assets under management that's tied to their 60+ segment, and a lot of these clients will be unfortunately passing away in the next 20-25 years. So it's creating just a massive asset flight risk, and I think the wealth industry overall is really thinking about how to facilitate that intergenerational wealth transfer and try to retain a maximum of those assets.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a really key thing to highlight. Well, why do you think fintech, or the fintech boom we've seen to date, has, I suppose we're assuming that it's focused on millennials rather than older customers, right? I think that's a fairly fair claim to make. Why do you think that's been the case? Because I think we're now starting to realise, as Alex has highlighted, that it's creating a problem, right? There's going to be this wealth transfer, and we've just been focusing on the young people. We've not been focusing on that top end of the spectrum. So why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's easier to design for millennials. So maybe there's that aspect. Like, millennials are less loyal to brands. They put higher emphasis on customer experience and UX. So therefore, to be able to create something that causes people to switch, you're going to look at an audience who are more open to that, perhaps. I think often older people can be less active money managers than perhaps some of the younger generations, because they've not got the tools that are quite, or they haven't had tools designed for them that are showing them where their money goes quite as much. And I think cynical part of me says that banks are perfectly happy with defaulting older people's savings accounts to lower rates, and keeping quiet about it because it makes money. So I think it's kind of weighing up commercially. Is it better for us to do nothing and just hope that people leave their money with us and we make a lot of money, than trying to create new products that are actually beneficial to the customer? And that's the cynic in me saying that.
Yes, but also very welcome to be cynical. But I'd love to get your perspective. You touched on how PensionBee has kind of started off helping customers who are sort of actively accruing their pensions, but you're now starting to offer more at that retirement age. So you've probably kind of got a good sense across that whole spectrum, right? Like, do you think Will's point is a fair one? Do millennials adopt fintech platforms more easily? Is there more of a challenge onboarding some of these older customers?
Yes, I agree. It's not difficult for us, and I don't want to sound too overly on this one, but it's actually relatively easy to acquire customers to combine two small pots, for example, when they're in their late 20s or early 30s. Two workplace pensions, two small pots. Hey, new app, new product. Hey, let's give this a try. But when you are 55 or you're 60, you might have £250,000 from 11 different jobs, and you will think twice before actually moving to a new provider, especially if it's just been around for a few years. I always say, would you trust all your life savings with a startup? I would not, so why would you? Now, PensionBee is not a startup anymore, but we're still quite a young company. So it's harder to convince that group that you are the main pension provider of choice and not just something on the side. And it's easy. And therefore you will find this. You see this back in your cost per acquisition on a particular age band. It's much more expensive to acquire those customers. But if you are able to convince them that you are the right provider for them, and they will do their homework, their due diligence, then the returns are also greater because. One, they make that decision and they actually don't move afterwards. They've then made their call, which is great. So it feels like a victory for us as a brand. But second, they bring more assets on their administration. The pension pots we see for customers in their 50s and 60s is 4 to 5 times the size that we see from a typical customer in their early 30s. So the return is greater.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nodding on Alex's side. I guess you must face a similar challenge, right? In that you're asking when you're managing someone's estate, there's a huge amount in that, right, Alex? So how have you tackled that challenge of getting that initial trust or that initial buy-in?
Yeah, I'm French Canadian, so there's not a cynical bone in my body. But in our company, we're essentially exclusively serving boomers. Not that we'd refuse anyone else, but just the nature of the services we provide and our product is really tailored for boomers. And I think there's a bit of a if it ain't broken, don't fix it mentality on this topic. And I think if I look at the younger boomers, they've been using traditional banking very successfully for close to 47 years, right? So. But when it comes to estate planning and estate settlement, things are broken. So it seems to me like boomers don't have any issues adopting products that are value added. And if I look at my peers like PensionBee, I think like combining, contributing, and withdrawing from a pension is a process that's historically been pretty difficult, especially if you've had multiple jobs in your career. Same goes for us, right? I think a rapidly growing number of boomers are now acting as executors, either on their parents' estates or siblings or spouses' estates, unfortunately. And they need to figure out probate, deal with death notices, financial institutions, and frankly, it's one of the most broken processes I've ever seen. And I think they're really looking for solutions to support them on all of these fronts. And they don't want to deal with 8 providers to figure out how to do this. So I think centralization is something that a lot of fintechs are adopting to solve a full problem. I think it's appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jasper sort of touched on like his perspective on like the size of this customer base and kind of the value of them. Kind of, would you agree? Like, is this like a sort of commercial opportunity that financial services should be exploring in more detail as an audience?
I mean, I'd say yes, just purely based on the fact that the longer you've lived, if you've done it right, the more money you've accrued, and therefore let's have a bit of it. That should be the approach here. Like the barriers to solving perhaps more complex problems, or, you know, from a design perspective, making interfaces that account for certain impairments or have to work a bit harder to have you. They shouldn't outweigh the commercial benefits that come with it. Like, I'm a design guy. I'm not the commercial guy, but my best guess is that there is a huge missed opportunity here. I don't know if anyone else would agree. Like, it seems like a no-brainer that people have been sleeping on it.
I think, you know, the point you made earlier about kind of like just hoping that if you don't move anything, if you don't touch anything for these customers, they'll just stay put and they'll just kind of accept like the existing products and services really resonates with me, because when we're in conversations with banks about designing new propositions, like building something new, there's always that kind of person in the room who like puts their hand up and says like, oh, but we don't want to frighten the older customers. So like banks do have this sense of like valuing this customer base because, you know, to your point, to Jasper's point, they typically have more assets that are sat in accounts, probably not moving as often as they should to hunt out rates and stuff. They're kind of happier to kind of be somewhere safe and sit there. But, you know, they're trying to just, you know, hope they don't notice, hope they just kind of stay put, and that they're not going to kind of be demanding new things and demanding new services. And so it's a weird relationship, I think. I think there's a recognition that these customers are valuable, but just not really an understanding of what it is that you need to do to kind of help them move into this truly digital space that we're seeing. It kind of feels like sometimes that there's a conversation just about Gen Z and millennials, and people kind of are just parking the question about older customers because it's difficult. And as you've said, there's lots of important but challenging accessibility questions, and how you kind of help people that might have particular kind of mobility needs or kind of requirements for how they read or interpret information, all that sort of stuff, I think scares a lot of financial institutions. And so we've kind of had this long stretch, I reckon, where we've just been kind of leaving it alone and hoping that it'll sort itself out. And I think now it really feels like the time to really focus on this audience properly and try and understand what it is they need to get done. But I don't know. How does that sound? Skeptical wise, I don't know. Maybe too skeptical.
I think you're right about how traditional financial institutions are approaching this particular age group, but they are thirsty. They are. It's just that, do they trust you enough to take the leap? And I'll give you an example. PensionBee has done roadshows this year. So we have been touring throughout the country in theaters, and we invited customers, but also their friends and family to come along. And I was in Birmingham and in Manchester a couple of weeks ago, and there we were. There were 350 people in a theater, all coming to listen to how much to save for happy retirement. And I tell you that over 50% of those customers were actually over 50. And our customer base is 20% over 50. So it gives you a bit of an idea. They came with their paperwork, bags of paperwork, and they were able to schedule an appointment with one of our beekeepers to talk through their circumstances. And those were people with £500,000 pension pots. Would you believe it? And they were just not sure about if this was the right thing to do, yes or no. They're craving for knowledge, they're craving for guidance, and the traditional companies, they tend not to give it, because then you will leave it. Its inertia will kick in. So if you are able as a new brand to step into this particular area with a mixture of activities, whether that's a roadshow or whether that's a personal video call or anything that kind of replicates that, would say, bank branch manager kind of mentality, or the financial person that was kind of like throughout their lives, I think you can really, really make a true difference, and they will actually then vote with their money. They will actually move it across to you, but it's a harder one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's probably a good segue for us to really zoom into the challenges that exist when it comes to designing and building products and services for this audience. So, well, we've touched on it a little bit already, but are there unique challenges when it comes specifically to design and UX for this age bracket?
Yeah, for sure. And I think before we go into that, I think it is worth pointing out this age bracket is quite large. If we're talking about someone that's 60, they probably feel the same as they did when they were 40. And I'm generalizing here, but there's a big difference in the needs of someone that's 60 and someone that's 80, say 85, and pre and post retirement, which I'm sure Jasper can talk about in greater detail. But I think if we're thinking about from a UX perspective, a lot of people think, oh, actually, this might be a look and feel thing. Yes, it is. Actually, from a brand execution perspective, that's all about trust. And helping people feel that their money is safe. There's so much sort of distrust of digital services still, and we even see this speaking to people that have £1 million fortunes. They still don't trust digital services, despite the fact being savvy enough to accrue that amount of money. I think using familiar patterns is really crucial, and perhaps simplified interfaces. All your classic accessibility requirements are there, from things that deal with visual impairments through to perhaps hearing and motor skill impairments. But I think the other thing is a lot of companies hide their accessibility options a little bit, and you have to ask. And I'm a big fan of Age UK, and that's one of the things that they point out. Yeah, a lot of people have it as a tick box exercise, but actually you kind of have to understand how to use the interface to be able to change it in a lot of cases. So from a digital perspective, it's a weird one. I think as well, we're not really... I think a lot of the sort of the fintechs that have sprung up and started to solve problems for younger customers would be of great value to older customers, but let's be honest, they're not designed around slightly older customers' mental model of money or what they're used to in terms of interacting. So from a UX perspective, it's worth considering that there are a lot of people that still use a passbook. I know people in my family that do, or they withdraw money every week and put it in an envelope. So the way that even people are budgeting is quite manual and different. And I think we spoke about this yesterday, actually, Kate, but actually trying to give people greater clarity and control by making them entirely rethink how their finances work and how they've thought about their entire lives isn't really the approach to this. It's understanding how people in this age bracket actually think about money and use money, and to design user experiences around those pre-existing mental models and constructs to try and give the same outcomes, from my perspective.
Yeah. Alex, what have been the main challenges that your team have come across as you've been building out your platform?
Well, just to build on Will before attacking that, but I think one key element it should be for any business, but I think particularly in designing for seniors, if you find a milestone moment in which the pain point is so present that the friction to adopting a new or trusting a new technology or company or service is lesser than the pain that's felt at that milestone moment. I think that's a key thing. And in our case, reality is like only less than 50% of people have a will. So that's the thing. People don't like to actually consider their own eventual demise, and I can't really blame them. But the reality is that's one of the big gaps, and I think it's in part it's in part a lack of understanding of the impact of what happens if I don't have a will. It's in part I'm not going to die, a feeling of invincibility in general, and kind of like magic thinking that everything's going to be okay. That's kind of like what we see, the trifecta that we see when we talk to customers and we try to understand why they're not moving forward in the process. That's really been key for us. But where that leads to is that when people don't move forward and the inevitable happens, it leads to more complex estates. It leads to more pain for your family. It leads to a more costly estate settlement process, and that usually means that your legacy and the inheritance that you leave behind is significantly lowered through these additional unforeseen costs. So I think it's really a question of education and helping clients understand that.
Yeah. Yes, but I thought it was super interesting. You were touching in the previous section on this roadshow that you guys have done. I think the first thing that most people think about when they think about this older audience is like physical locations, right? Like, I remember when I first joined 11FS and I was chatting to my grandma and trying to explain what on earth I was doing in my professional life. She sort of said to me, like, are you responsible for the bank branches closing? As if I was like individually going around and like locking the doors myself. But it is kind of the stereotype that lots of people think that these older customers have a very strong preference for physical locations. And obviously, you guys at PensionBee don't have a physical location that people can come to normally, but you've set up these roadshows. So I'm interested, like, what drove that? Do you think that physical element is key to these customers?
To a certain degree. I believe it's definitely something that you can't replicate. What you can replicate is if you are assuming that that particular pockets of the generation we talk about today did their business, their banking business, for example, in a branch, or had that personal relationship, or opening a bank account was in person rather than just online. What you can do is you can digitally replicate that because they value the personal connection they have to a particular person. So, for example, we replicate that by having your own personal beekeeper. So that's a person assigned to your account that is visible in your account. There's a photo of that person with a direct phone number to call. So we group customers around beekeepers. And I think that is one way how you can replicate that experience experience. And that really builds a lot of trust. But then also, are you real or are you just an app? The roadshow can definitely help. We're going to transform this into pension clinics next year, so we can do more locations where people can make appointments, where we go to hotels and venues where people can just meet us. So you can replicate a lot online. But then there is I would say there is a bit where you can say, actually, if you can go for like more personal touch to it, like events, etc., where they can meet you. We have seen certainly that the over 50s are overrepresented in the groups of people. So I think that is I would say that's something for me that definitely resonates. The other thing also to bear in mind is they like their bank branch, but they've also been using mobile banking quite a lot. So when we were designing our drawdown product at PensionBee, we first went to a web experience, the web app. And actually, our customers are asking for mobile app drawdown, so in the mobile app. So we're releasing that now as we speak. You can do one-offs now, you can do regular now very soon. And that is because they used to do that in their mobile banking app when they do their bank account business. So if you can replicate that for a pension product or any other product, they skipped the web experience altogether. They went straight to an app. Just all of these things really important to consider when you are designing new products for customers in that age group.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really cool thing, really key thing to call out. And I suppose as with all groups, like the pandemic has, I'm sure, been a massive accelerant of this. Like, I don't know, Alex, Jasper, like from your perspective, like what impact have you seen the pandemic in particular have? Like, has it created new challenges, or is it just kind of helped move more people online? Alex?
I don't think we could exist as an organization without all the huge leap forward in tech adoption that agencies like courthouses and government agencies were forced to adopt. I mean, just pre-pandemic and even like early in the pandemic, probate hearings were done in person. And so people sometimes had to travel hundreds of miles to go to a hearing for 10 minutes with a judge and get their documents stamped. And now it's all Zoom hearings. It's much faster, much simpler. The judges can actually process a lot more cases in a day. There's no kind of like delays tied to technology now, but they're more easily fixable. And I think that's been tremendous. Digital signatures have become widespread and adopted by government agencies and financial institutions, and that really propelled us forward. We're a company that's born out of the pandemic. We launched in October 2020, so it really helped propel us forward in this whole process of settling estates and dealing with courts.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. I suppose, going back to our conversation earlier about like how potentially there might have been almost an assumption like from financial institutions that if you kind of just ignored these customers for long enough, or gradually like they'd move away, and maybe like the millennials who understand how these products would just become old and it would all happen naturally and organically, and you wouldn't have any kind of like big shift to manage. I wonder, I think that's the thing that I find most interesting about the pandemic, is it maybe kind of forced some of these older customers online before they were kind of naturally ready. And it's just, what challenges does that create? Like, you kind of aren't just having those early adopters amongst the older segment, you're kind of forcing lots of people to uptake technology. But how did you manage that, Jasper?
So I think that's spot on. So I think the pandemic has presented companies, new players on the market, to actually play level field with some of the incumbents, because suddenly electronic signatures were fine. That wasn't fine before the pandemic, I can tell you that, from some provider perspective, but also a lot of customers who feel unease by putting a signature with their finger on a phone screen. Now that's perfectly acceptable and also accepted by providers. So consumers really almost like adapted really quickly to the new reality. And if you've got the technology enabling, you've got that, then it means that you are actually starting to be spearing ahead. PensionBee grew quite substantially, accelerated our growth during the pandemic. And then there's on the other side, they also reap the benefits of it, because a lot of providers who would not normally provide those digital services, and Alex pointed on court hearings, etc. In our case, paper pension transfers, they could take up to 6 months. I think 30% of our transfers were still paper-based from old pension providers. I call them steam-powered pension providers, to new providers like PensionBee. That's really gone down, because also those people have replaced their steam with something much more modern and electronic. So from a consumer perspective, there's been a massive adoption, and like you said, it's being kind of forced almost upon them that this is the new reality. And the providers and incumbents also had to play catch up. I would say providers like Alex and PensionBee and many others in this playing field will have an advantage actually on this one. So you need to grab this opportunity now before they catch up.
Okay, and on that note, we're just going to take a quick pause. We'll be back very shortly.
Hello and welcome
LFG people.
To Fintech Insider,
Blockchain Insider.
11FS Spotlight.
11FS Explores.
Open Mic Night.
After Dark.
Through our podcasts, videos, newsletters, and live events, we have a direct line to a truly global fintech community. So if you're looking to sponsor and collaborate on content that connects with everybody from fintech beginners to the biggest VCs, then chat to our team at sponsors@11fs.com or visit 11fs.com to find out more.
Long live the community.
Okay, we've done a really good deep dive into kind of how things stand today, some of the key challenges you have to overcome in this space. So let's have a think about the future. Well, as we've talked about, we're starting to see like banks think about this audience, fintechs like PensionBee and ClearEstate are already starting to serve this audience. Like, do you think we're going to see better services for these customers?
Look, I genuinely do. And look, Jasper alluded to it, but customers who perhaps weren't in this bracket that got on board with newer services, say, coming up to 10 years ago, maybe not that long, but as they move towards different priorities in life, for instance, finding out the importance of wills, as we had the discussion during the break there, and other things there, I think there is then an opportunity with their existing customers to offer other services. And I think it's not necessarily building those things in, but perhaps there are partnership opportunities to be explored for a lot of incumbents and fintechs alike to be able to start to serve this market a little bit better.
Yes, but obviously, you've again sort of hinted to how you're shifting your roadmap, right, as PensionBee kind of gets more established and your customer base matures. How do you think your role will change as your customers age? Is it going to kind of broaden out your focus? Are you going to start to add additional things into your offering?
I would say our main proposition is, and probably will still for a long time be, that you consolidate first before you do anything else, that you need to take control over all of those lost spots. That's what we came to do in the UK. But there's a difference between consolidate and contribute versus consolidate and, hey, what's the gap? What's the gap and how do I actually take money out? So making sure that after consolidating, we offer things like withdrawals, offer annuities, and other means of making sure you are planning ahead for a happy retirement. I think it's going to be really important. It's currently our main focus in our product development this year, the second half of this year. You will probably see some more products rolling out as a result. For example, this generation deals with their parents who are passing away, unfortunately. What do you do with inherit pension pots? Because guess what? People are not drawing down their pension pots completely. So, that's a product we don't offer at the moment, and we probably should. So that's one side of it, the product. The other side is education and mindset change. Because, surprise, surprise, when you are retired, we see that people still save. And actually, you shouldn't. So you need to think about, right, when do I want to retire? When do I get the state pension? Oh, there is a gap in between. So how do I fund that if I want to do that and beyond? So offering good planning tools, but also tell them you need to spend it. So it's education and mindset change, and that seems to be a really hard one to crack. But that's I feel that's almost our duty of care, that we should be also there not just to take your money, but also we need to tell you how to spend it wisely so you can build a happy retirement. And that's increasingly becomes the role of our pension company, because like I told before, like when people join, they stick around. It's a very, like, the retention rates are enormous. So when you actually convince them to move, they stay with you. And I think you've got a responsibility to look after them until the last day of their lives.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting opportunity space. Like, as we've talked about, just almost if you took existing fintech services and just applied new design patterns or kind of made them more relevant, like how that would be a step forward in this space for these older customers. But I think they do have fundamentally like different challenges. If you think about the problems we see lots of customers facing when they just have almost like, for many people still, like a single income source that hits their account and then has to be distributed across lots of different places. That's complicated enough as it is, let alone when you're in retirement and you've got choices between all these different potential income sources. Here are the things that you need to get done in this thing today, this week, this month. Is that going to be paid for by your pension? Is that going to be paid for by your savings? What are you going to take in what order? And yeah, it's a very different mindset shift, as you say, moving from that, to use retirement like product language, like to move from like the accumulation phase when everything is rosy and it's just this upward trajectory to like the decumulation phase when you're trying, as you say, make this very difficult trade-off between wanting to live the best life you can without having any kind of certainty about how long you're going to be living for. Kind of managing that kind of glide path, I think, is a fundamentally different challenge to the financial issues that somebody has in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s even. So I'd love us to see, we're going, parking the cynicism and sort of just thinking optimistically, I'd love to see us using technology to try and help customers navigate that. As you say, Jasper, like it feels like a space that's crying out for really smart planning tools, really smart guidance, kind of using kind of the best of sort of tech and analysis to really help people work out when they're spending too much, like when they need to make adjustments, if they're going to make adjustments, where those come from. So yeah, just that's just my personal thing that I'm excited about. Like I'd love to see that kind of emergent space taking off.
Yes, and it's changing. That's the good news. Up until recently, as a company, you were actually not allowed to do this because it would be considered as advice and that you get into qualified financial advisory space. But the FCA has clearly set out guidelines now with regards to what are some current pathways, retirement pathways. And the FCA is actually encouraging more guidance and more smarter planning tools. And that's a really good thing to see. So what you will find is that companies will be able to go more into this guidance route rather than just stay away from it and say, no, it's non-advisory, it's all yours. And that's changing. And I think that's really good.
Yeah, for sure. Alex, what would you love to see happen in the future in this space?
Well, one thing we notice is that, we have a strange dichotomy going on because, we have two products. On the settlement side, it's very pragmatic. Someone is legally bound to settle the estate and do everything that's tied to it. But, building on what Jasper was saying and you were saying, Kate, our planning product is kind of a dream state. It's not the retirement planning phase, it's the legacy planning phase. So we kind of encourage and allow our clients to dream a little bit. And one of the things that we do is capture all of their we call it their number, right? So what's your net worth and calculate everything that goes into it. And we feel like this feeling of their clients are proud of what they've been able to accumulate over time, and they're proud of what they want to leave behind. So they're thinking about their grandchildren, their children, and all of that. So I think leveraging that and getting more people educated, I think as the death rates increase, more and more people see, they have siblings and parents and friends that pass away. It's a trigger moment to think about their own estate and their own legacy, and people start thinking about that. And what I want to see is kind of an increased accessibility for estate planning tools and services overall. I think it's already begun, but I think we'll see that accelerating. And it's just such a big market, and there's such a big need that it's absolutely fine that there should be more fintechs taking a look at that, and legal techs taking a good look at that. I think we'll see more vertical integration of estate planning and settlement services tied to adjacent services. So I'm thinking about estate planning providers starting to offer life insurance as part of the of their intake process. Funeral prearrangement makes a lot of sense as well, because it's part of the conversation when you're planning your legacy. I think we see more and more people taking an adoption of naming a professional executor in their will instead of naming a family member or a friend, which is going through a really, really hard time already. And the cherry on top is just like, hey, now you take care of all this problem. But naming a professional executor who's a neutral third party is something that I'm starting to see a lot more on, and that we're starting to offer in some of our key jurisdictions that we're in. And I think on the settlement side, there's a lot of financial products that can be added, like estate bank accounts, which is part of the process. And it's kind of a new bank account that you never knew existed, but all of a sudden everyone's telling you that you need to get. And having like managed wealth and even inheritance lending, not in this financial environment, but when the interest rates start going down, I think inheritance lending is a phenomenal product that can help a lot of families through a really tough time. So I think these are all ways that we can improve the customer journey and for the fintechs, just increase the lifetime value of each customer that we get.
Absolutely. We're sadly coming towards the tail end of the show, so I'm going to have to close this off. I'd love to carry on chatting all day. It's a super, super fascinating topic. I suppose at the start of the show, we had as our framing question, has a fintech revolution ignored older customers? So I suppose, firstly, I'd like to get your answer, like, in summary, like yes or no, and if yes, like what is like the one thing that you would like fintech to focus on next? So, well, has fintech ignored older customers, and what should they do next?
Yes. Well, it's not ignored them, it's just not prioritized older customers, I think, or designed around them. Like I said before, if they can find it and they can use it and are digitally savvy enough to adopt it, it doesn't present an insurmountable hurdle to use a lot of the fintechs. But what I'd like to see next is, I think consistently, like banks and fintechs treat people's finances around just the individual. And actually, a lot of people in later life, it's more around the other people in your life, the family unit. And the more that you are aware of that and combining those finances, for example, if someone loses a partner who did most of the financial work, they're then left with dealing with all of that. A bank should know about these things. And I think, this plays into what both Alex and Jasper deal with their companies. So I think understanding people's lifestyle and the people in it and trying to connect those a little bit more earlier on makes it a little bit easier to prepare for what comes later. Interesting.
Alex, obviously you guys are a fintech, right? So I know that you're not ignoring this audience, but do you think fintech more broadly has, and if so, what they should do next?
So no, but I agree with Will. I think it's just a question of prioritization. So it's just glass half empty or glass half full. There's certainly less adoption with older generation. I think just as a startup owner, you think about where's there's the less friction and higher adoption rate for fintech products, and that's younger generation. And I look at our own business model, and I think we're just navigating a very, very regulated, extremely complex environment and selling complicated products. So educating people who will only buy this once in their lives, hopefully. So I don't think we chose the path of least resistance here, but it's the pain point we identified and fell in love with, and it's really been a prioritization and timing issue. And as I said earlier, I think without the pandemic, really accelerating the adoption of digital-only services across like courthouses and government agencies. I'm not sure that the timing would have allowed for ClearEstate to exist, and I think personally thankful for that. And it's always great when there's a moment in time where there's a great leap in adoption of technology, and this is it.
And then yes, I suppose, last word to you. So, what's your perspective? Has FinTech ignored these customers, and what should they do next?
I would say they've not been ignored completely, but they've definitely not been the main focus for many fintechs. For the simple reason, it's much harder to convince that generation to come to you. So it's harder to acquire those customers. They have more complicated needs, more complicated products are needed. So all of that together makes it it's harder to address their needs and acquire them efficiently. However, if you do get them, they're very loyal. It's also profitable because they tend to be more wealthy. It comes with extra responsibilities with looking after them. But above all, they are not looking for the latest snazzy, sexy app. They're looking for a meaningful product. And I think if you can do that, then I think you will strike gold. And it also makes your job a lot more meaningful. So you're less lazy, but actually much more harder working to really capture that, because they're very hard to convince to come over to you.
I think that's a pretty good pitch. Well, that wraps up today's discussion. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Like, where can people find out more about you, the work that you do, your company as well?
Just reach out to me on LinkedIn and 11fs.com for us.
Awesome. Jasper?
Very happy to chat with you on LinkedIn or on Twitter. It's called X now these days, Jasper Martens. And also PensionBee.com, or download our app.
Absolutely. And Alex, what about you?
I'd say visit ClearEstate.com and feel free to mention Fintech Insider. We'll be happy to provide 15% discount to your listeners.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
I should have prepared a pitch for that one then, Alex.
Yeah, smooth. I like it. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Kate Moody, or on email at kate@learnfest.com. Thank you very much for listening. If you like what you've heard, follow our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us to make the show better and helps others to find the show too. As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or Fintech Insider, or email podcasts@11fest.com. Thanks very much. Goodbye.